Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Tedeschi Trucks rocks Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I spoke with Susan Tedeschi about how she fused her own acclaimed blues career with husband Derek Trucks to form the Grammy-winning band. Susan Tedeschi, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I spoke with your husband, Derek Trucks, back when you played the Warner in 2020, but I think it was in like February of 2020. Little did we know the world would go to hell in like a month after that. But how have you spent the pandemic? When did you guys get back out there? All that stuff.
So basically, that was correct. Like we did the Warner and then we played the Ryman, and then Derek played at Madison Square Garden with the Allman Brothers, and we did a benefit at the Beacon for Love Rocks, and then the world shut down for us. And then we flew home, I think it was like Friday the 13th of March of 2020. And then we were home for a good 18 months, didn't work. Literally couldn't because of the pandemic and everything. So it was just the strangest thing. So we all started writing, and Mike gave us sort of like a inspiration for a theme for writing, and then we all like kind of went home and wrote songs, and we got back together and started demoing them and writing them and finishing them up, and then we ended up making 4 records of music basically that we are actually in the process of mixing right now. Actually our engineer is at home right now mixing the 4 episodes, and it ended up being like really busy even though we were off, just because, we can't sit still, and figured, well, we have some off time. We have a studio in our backyard, so we're going to make a bunch of music. And actually it came out really amazing, and, we're really excited about it. It should be coming out this summer for the summer tour, for the Wheels of Soul tour. But yeah, that was pretty much what we're up to. And then we started getting back on the road. We did a smaller thing actually before we went on the road with what we called the Fireside Sessions. And it was 6 of the 12-piece band, the people that we were kind of closest to because we're in Florida, and then the guys that lived in Georgia, and then Gabe, who lives up in Nashville. So we all kind of drove to our farm in Georgia and set up a live streaming of us playing live, and we did that for a good handful of shows. And then by the time we finally got out working, it was just the Fire Session, the 6 of us again, because we just couldn't, I don't know, it was just so crazy. We couldn't open up to capacity, so we couldn't, it's a big band, it's a big band and crew, so it costs a lot of money to actually do it, and we just weren't going to be able to do that. So we tapered it all down and put band and crew on one bus and did that from June until August, or May. I think it was May, June, July, and August of 2021 that we started really getting out and working again. And then the whole band got together with us in August of 2021 at Lock-In, and then we started working with them again. So we're on the road now. We're actually in Chicago, playing the Chicago Theater. We do a residency here too. So yeah, it's been crazy, but really good. Thankful to be working.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you stayed busy during all that, quote unquote time off from the road. It sounds like you didn't take much actual time off. Sounds like you were busy writing your faces off the whole time. So that's great. So
yeah, we were, which is good though.
Yeah, it really is. So wait, real quick, you mentioned that, you had a recording studio like in your backyard. Where is this? Is this in Georgia, or is that separate from the farm in Georgia?
That's separate than the farm. That's we live in Jacksonville, Florida, and our studio is literally a building in our backyard, like totally separate than our house. So yeah, we would go in there and record, and then yeah. So I mean, it's just nice and convenient, and we got to be home with our kids before our son went off to college. And, so it was nice, to have some real downtime when we were first writing and hadn't really got back together yet. So I'd say for like March, April, May, June, July. So a good 5 months, we were just kind of at home with our kids, which was really nice, especially since they're growing up so fast.
Oh my gosh! In the blink of an eye, and a lot. You look back before. I look back at my own niece and nephew before the pandemic, and I'm like, oh my god, they got so they grew up so much in the last 2 years.
It's
But yeah, okay,
crazy. I
it's
know.
it's crazy. But
Exactly.
all right, cool. So if our listeners come out to the Warner, then are they going to hear any of the stuff you were working on during the pandemic, or are you saving that mostly for the Wheel of Souls tour in the summer?
We
Is this
yeah. Well, what we're doing is we are songs from both of our catalogs. So I'm doing some stuff from like some of my old records, like Just Won't Burn record and things like that. And Derek's been doing some old DTB stuff. And so we've been trying to freshen it up a little bit, as well as doing all of our records for Tedeschi Trucks Band, mixing it up and doing different stuff every night. So it's still really fun and fresh, but we are saving all the new stuff for the summer just because that's how you have to do it nowadays, or so it's going to be fun to have new fresh stuff, and it'll be exciting, so it'll be really good when it comes out.
awesome? Well, definitely everyone check out the Warner Theater first, and then you can maybe hit Wolf Trap and see the other stuff in the summer. 2 different shows. It'll be great. All right, cool. So
Exactly.
whenever I have someone, Grammy winner like yourself on, I love to hear sort of the, your journey. So I know you were born in Boston back in the 70s. What stuff did you grow up listening to? What was it? A lot of blues? Was it Bonnie Raitt, Janis Joplin, or what kind of stuff got you into music in the beginning?
Yeah, it was a mix of stuff. My parents were kind of folkies. My dad was, and my mom were both really into Bob Dylan, so I was a huge Dylan fan growing up. And some of the earliest stuff I remember is blues. My dad would play me Lightning Hopkins, and he'd play me everything from, I mean, Son House to Reverend Carey Davis and artists like that. But he also would play me the staple singers, who I love gospel music, so I always loved Mavis Staples and pop staples. Also, grew up loving Aretha Franklin and of course Bonnie Raitt. I didn't really know about Bonnie until I was in college, but when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I love her. I loved everything about her. So she's fabulous and has been an inspiration through the years too. John Prine, Leonard Cohen. I love great songwriters. I just, you know, one of my favorite artists to sing is Bob Dylan, just because I love his music so much. But growing up, I really got turned on to a lot of different things. Country music, of course. Then later on, when I had actually graduated college, is really when I started to get into the blues. I had some friends who were running a blues jam in Boston at Johnny D's, and they were like, "Hey, we need some singers. Why don't you come down and learn some tunes?" So I did, and then it was just kind of, I fell in love with all these artists that I didn't know about growing up. I didn't know about Freddie King and Big Mama Thornton, and I didn't know about Magic Sam and all these really cool artists. Really got into Junior Wells and Buddy Guy and BB King and John Lee Hooker, and then I somehow lucked out in the late '90s. I had done different bands. I grew up playing in local, garage bands and stuff. We would do everything from like Boston and all these types of bands. Heart or whatever. When you're a kid, you just do whatever people can play.
And you were called the
So we
smoking
did all
section,
different.
right? The smoking section.
No, so yeah, actually, the smoking section was a band that Ted Larkin. He was a drummer and a songwriter, and he invited me when I was in college to come and join that band. And it was this guy on guitar, Rick Dillon, and then Sean McCarthy on bass, and then Ted Larkin on drums. And so that was the smoking section, and that was when I was about 17 or 18. And so I met those guys when I was going to Berkeley in Boston, and I started doing that band, and that was a great band, fabulous band, great songwriting, just really cool. And then we would do stuff from like the band, or we do like old Beatles stuff, and it was just cool. It was like J.J. Cale and just good old fashioned American music. But before that, I was in a band that didn't even have a name. I don't even think we had a name. It was just this kid from Situate, Terry Stebbins, who had a band, and he needed a singer. So I joined that band, and we would go play at like, private parties and, yacht clubs and silly stuff. So I did that for a long time. And then also growing up, I did a lot of musical theater. So I literally have been on stage since I was 6 years old, doing about 4 shows a year until I was about 17. So I was a very busy kid. I also did sports somehow. I don't know how. I played basketball. I was a cheerleader sometimes. And I was also in drama club. So I did a lot of different things and stayed really busy. But it really wasn't until my love of blues that I was like, okay, I had done like wedding band stuff right out of college, but was really sad and needed to have my own band. And I met Adrian Hayes from Gloucester and Little Annie Raines from Newton. And the three of us decided to put a blues band together. And that's when I had my first solo band. And that was in 1993. And we entered like the Boston Battle of the Blues Bands and somehow came in first and then went down to Memphis and came in second for the international blues competition. And the one that I guess the band that came in first, they weren't really a real band, so they couldn't tour because one of the things was like if you won, you could play at like the King Biscuit Festival and Jacksonville at the Spring and the Blues Festival. So we ended up getting all those spots because we were a real band. So that was huge for us. That just like opened doors. And after that, we made our first record. We made Better Days. I'd borrowed some money and sold it off the stage and then ended up getting a record deal through Tone Cool and Rounder. And from there, it was just all of a sudden when we did our Tone Cool record, it was kind of a breakthrough record for me. They were hoping to sell like 60,000 records and I sold 600,000 records. It was kind of like, what?
Tell me about Writing It Hurts So Bad. That's the one a lot of my wife is huge. She grew up singing that song. So tell me about how you came up with that one.
Well, so actually I was, so when we started that band, Tom Hambridge, who was kind of a big, local artist, and he definitely was a great songwriter as well as singer and drummer. Well, he's the one that wrote It Hurt So Bad. And, he had the idea for it. And then, I helped, add my thing to it. But really it was mostly his song. And then he also, started Rock Me Right, he wrote as well. And Adrian and Annie and I helped him finish it. But, those were really two of TH's songs. And he also produced that record. He also produced Just Won't Burn. So he was an integral part of making that record, and a lot of the success for that was definitely him. And that's when I got like my first major Grammy Award nomination for Best New Artist. So I was up in 2000 against Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, Macy Gray, Kid Rock. And here's me, like this blues artist. It doesn't make any sense,
Hey,
but
you might have outlasted all of them. Think about it.
Well, honestly, I feel lucky. I feel like I've been continuing to get better. I haven't like plateaued, which I think is very common for a lot of artists,
Definitely. And you mentioned that Grammy nomination for Best New Artist and, such a star-studded class. Any memories just from Grammy night sitting there hoping they're going to call your name or getting to interact with your fellow nominees that were like massive stars at the time? Any good stories from that day?
Yeah, well, actually, I had gone out to, when we got nominated, they had a bunch of us meet up in Chicago and do like a press conference. So I got to meet like Kid Rock and a bunch of them. And they had invited me to play at the Grammys that year, but they wanted me to play with Kid Rock. And I was just like, I didn't want to do it. I just didn't think it was a good fit. And my boyfriend at the time was Derek. And he was like, no, you should not play with Kid Rock. So no offense to Kid Rock, but just stylistically at the time, it was just like a little strange and it just didn't seem to fit. And I was kind of a worried mess. Like I was just nervous, I would get nervous during that time period. And so I didn't do it, which it could have changed a lot of things, but honestly, I'm fine. Like I was never looking for fame, like some artists are like, yeah, they're out for money and fame and all that, but I'm just trying to make music and trying to work on my craft and trying to be a better musician, all the time. So sometimes you have to make calls that are, good for you, and that's basically what I did. And then I was lucky enough to somehow be nominated 5 more times. And, some of them were amazing, like up against, a lot of my heroes like Etta James and Irma Thomas and some with, and then Sheryl Crow, I think her and I were up for a couple things. And, so it was really cool. It was great to meet all those women. And the first one, it was amazing because I got to meet Aretha Franklin and Prince. Like they're just sitting there at the Grammys. I was like, oh my gosh, like what? Like get out of town. And Herbie Hancock, and it was just over the top the artists that were in the audience. And So
Right.
that was really cool. And Derek actually got to hang out with Wayne Shorter that day, which is like one of his big heroes. So, it was definitely fun. We definitely got to meet a lot of really nice people. And it was a big breakthrough time for me. And then because of that nomination, I ended up getting to tour actually about like a year earlier. I started touring with BB King. I started touring with John Mellencamp was the first one that really took me out under his wing, and I got to open for him, and that was incredible. I mean, we did so many great things. And then he introduced me at Farm Aid to Willie Nelson and Neil Young, and I became friends with them through John. So that was incredible. And to this day, I'm still very close with Willie and his family and his wife, Annie, and everybody. They're amazing and so down to earth and just the baddest, like so amazing. Awesome. So honestly, that really did change my life. And I feel like I've lived a dream. I got to open for a lot of my heroes. And then, I was playing with Double Trouble at one point, and we opened up for the Allman Brothers, and that's when I met my husband. And he was playing with the Allman Brothers in the summer of '99. And yeah, we've been together ever since. Married 20 years, been together 22 years, have two kids, 20 and 17 or 18, and yeah, they're just it just has kind of flown by. So I
Wow.
feel very
Yeah.
blessed. Get to play with all my heroes: B.B. King, John Lee Hooker, the Stones, Carlos Santana. I mean, it's kind of like a dream. It doesn't make sense at all, but I'm very thankful for it.
That's right. That's right. You opened for the Stones too. Wow. I mean, yeah, you've done it all. Well, you mentioned several times, that how you were dating Derek Trucks, and then I think you guys married in like 2001. But and obviously he was the nephew of Butch Trucks, of the Allman Brothers drummer, and so that's how all that sort of ties together. But did you were you aware that there was this child prodigy on guitar? Like, were you sort of like tracking him for years before you guys actually met and ended up falling in love and getting married? Like, were you aware of him?
I was aware of him at one point when he was really young. I had heard him on the radio playing with the Allman Brothers, and he was like in his teens. But then I never really thought much about it. And then I was actually dating Sean Costello back in like '98, and he said, or '97, '98, and he said, my favorite guitar player, we got to go see him, is this guy Derek Trucks. So we went to Smith's Old Bar in Atlanta, and I went and saw Derek for the first time. And I met him briefly, but I didn't really talk to him or anything or get to know him. But so I knew who he was, and I knew he was incredible. Like I heard him, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. There's no, I to this day haven't really heard a guitar player that can touch him. I don't. I just there's nobody that plays like that or thinks like that or can be so versatile. It's one thing to be a great guitar player, but it's another thing to be able to be a great rhythm player and a great band leader and a great songwriter and producer. And like, he's just got the whole thing. So it's not like he's just a guitar player. He's really a phenomenal musician, just all around.
Right.
So yeah, I knew about him, but I didn't know him really well until that summer of '99 when we started dating.
Wow. Well, I'd say that all worked out swimmingly for the two of you guys. So at that point, basically, you're having to combine. I guess he had the Derek Trucks band at the time. You had Susan Tedeschi band, and I guess you formed them together. But it wasn't Tedeschi Trucks yet, right? You did Soul Stew Revival first, right?
Yep, we did that first. So basically, we didn't want to have a band together without really building on our relationship first. So we were, like you said, we had my solo band, his solo band, and the Allman Brothers, because he was in the Allman Brothers for 15 years. So we basically had three bands, and then we had kids. So we had two kids and three bands. And then he started playing with Clapton when the kids were little. So that was four bands and two children. it was kind of over the top. I don't know if many people could really do it, but somehow we did it. And and because of that, it just made us stronger. And then we finally put a band together in 2010. So Soul Stew Revival was like 2008. And what we did is we both had like our solo bands tour together. And then we started doing Soul Stew Revival. And then that was kind of like a mix of some of the two bands, but it was actually a different band. Like we still had like different horn players and stuff that were in the band too. But then we decided in 2010, Derek's like, hey, I'm going to start a band. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So then I had to like really think about leaving my solo project and just going for it. And so that's what we did. and we just started all over, and we put this band together. And it's changed a tiny bit here and there, a couple horn players, a couple bass players or drummers and stuff, but for the most part, we're all still here. And if anything, we just added on it. We have a few new members, but it's just been amazing. And it's almost like being on an Olympic team of musicians because everybody's a badass. So it's just like, wow, okay, this is awesome. This is really unique. So I feel very lucky to be in this band.
It's an
For
Olympic
sure.
team. Yeah, you take the stage and it's no. So I don't think you guys will be playing that at the Warner. But real quick before we run, tell me about Revelator. I guess in 2012, after all those Grammy nominations you mentioned, you finally break through and win as Tedeschi Trucks for Best Blues Album with Revelator. But memories of just recording that one, gosh, it's been a decade ago now. Probably hard to believe.
I know. It's so crazy. So yeah, that band started 12 years ago, and it was really fun. It was really cool. And we actually wrote with Oliver Wood from the Wood Brothers. We wrote with John Leventhal, who's Roseanne Cash's husband. We wrote by ourselves. Mike Madison, obviously, and Derek wrote stuff like Midnight in Harlem and Bound for Glory, and a lot of those songs, classic songs for our band now. But it was just a really beautiful time. Just the birth of the band and getting to know each other and writing, and we really formed huge bonds. And it's been amazing to be able to continue to write with the band, with Mike and with Derek, and just from there, it's grown. Like other people in the band now write too, but it was always Derek and Mike were like the main writers, and then just from there it's expanded. So it's been a great journey. It's been amazing to see where this band has gone, and like how we have just continued to keep writing and working and touring and getting to see all these amazing places. And so it's been fun. I mean, we're really very blessed to do what we do.
Definitely. Well, is there anything new we should plug, or at least semi recent? I mean, actually, tell us about. Didn't you do a
Yes.
Layla Revisited thing?
Yes, we did. So actually, there's two things going on right now that have been kind of going on during the pandemic. And one is we had done a live show at Lock-In with Trey Anastasia from Fish, and we did the entire Layla record. And then during the lockdown, the boys were mixing it, and they're like, "Hey, this is actually really good." And so they realized that, wow, like we should make this an album. So we did, and that came out this past summer, and it's been awesome. And it's been going really well, and honestly, that was so fun. Like Trey is the nicest guy. It was really fun to do that project with him, and Doyle came out and played on it live with us too. And Doyle and Derek obviously both play with Eric, so that definitely gave it that Derek and the Dominoes thing that you really kind of have in order to pull off a lot of those songs. So that was really special, and it's just nice that we captured a moment, but it was one of those records that kind of influenced all of us. And I actually found out during the making of that I was born the day that record came out. So the day that Layla came out is the day I was born, November 9, 1970. It was kind of nuts, very serendipitous. So yeah,
Wow,
that
wait,
one's
so
out now. And
you
then
were born on the day that came out, and also, I mean, I asked when I spoke to your husband Derek, he said that he doesn't know if he was directly named after Derek and the Dominoes, but he says it could have been possible that factored in. But so that it kind of comes full
no,
circle to
it's
both of you.
pretty, yes, for both of us, absolutely. Yeah, he was definitely named after Dwayne. Derek, from Derek and the Dominoes, and Dwayne was in that band. And so that's also kind of crazy too. So then you have Eric and Dwayne, which together is Derek, right? If you think of it that way, like Eric and Dwayne together is Derek.
Right.
So that's kind of crazy. And
Wow.
so I definitely think it was full circle for both of us. I think it was just meant to be.
That's
Absolutely.
great. And then was there something else you said there was two things you were working on? That was that and
Yeah,
something
and
else?
yeah, so in 2015, we had done Lock-In once again. What they do at Lock-In is Pete Shapiro is really great at getting different like acts to get together and do a show that they maybe wouldn't do. You know what I mean? Like he gets different artists together. So they had been working on getting us together with Joe Cocker, but then he got sick, and he had ended up passing away. And they're like, well, what about doing a tribute to him? And we're like, well, we didn't really know him that good. Like, I don't know. We were trying to figure out stuff. And to make a long story short, they got us together with Leon, and Leon was the musical director on the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. So we had done some shows with Leon, and ended up putting together like a combination band of our band with the remaining members of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour from 1970. So everybody came out, and a lot of those guys were Carl Radel and Jim Gordon were on Derek and the Dominoes. So they were part of that band as well. So there's like a lot of incestuous stuff going on there, like between bands. And we were lucky enough to get to play with Leon and Rita Coolidge and Claudia Lanier and Chuck Blackwell and Chris Staten. So a lot of and then there's the Moore brothers. There's, so many people that came out of the woodwork that had been on that tour. And then we combined them with us and some other guests and did a live performance. And so that became a record. And actually it was also a movie. So really there was this young filmmaker, Jesse Lauder, that had the idea to film all of this, like the reunion of the Mad Dogs guys, and then all the rehearsals with us, and then filming the performance and going in and, diving into the deep history of that band and our band, which kind of came about based on that style of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen band. So it was really cool. So that movie is actually out in certain theaters now. It's called Learning to Live Together. And it's a documentary based on, the meeting of the two bands, but also like the history of Leon with that band. And then Derek kind of coming in and him and Leon working together and making this project happen. So it was really quite a magical thing. And the documentary is out now, and it's actually winning like different film awards, like, going to different places, like in Prague, they won, and, kind of like the Cannes, film festival, those kind of different film festivals. And it's, people have been really digging it. So it's been going really well too. So you can sometimes find that in different cities, they'll have viewings of it. So that's been really fun.
Can our listeners watch it streaming? I guess it's got to finish the festival run first, and then maybe we'll be able to see it.
Yeah, I think they are going to end up being able to stream it. I think it's just right now it's in like kind of like cool, like little hip theaters, like that you can sometimes go and see artsy documentary kind of stuff in certain theaters. Yeah. And so if you look it up online, they do have a schedule of different cities that are playing it. And it's been really cool. And then some of the members have been showing up to the viewings, which have been cool. And they've been doing some question and answering kind of little things at the end too. Derek and I did one in Jacksonville, so that was really fun.
Cool. So
it's been going great.
We'll keep an eye out for that, called Learning to Live Together. And then just so our listeners know, you dropped the name Lock-In Festival a couple times there. And that's we're a DC station. So
and Arrington,
right outside in Arrington, Virginia. Well, I guess not right outside. It's more like middle Virginia, somewhere over there, I think. But
it's not that far.
Close enough.
It's like an hour or something. Yeah, it's not that far. And it's a great festival and always has so many great bands. And it's just really cool. It's just, I don't know. It's a really, really nice festival. I really like it.
Awesome. Well, we really can't wait to see you all again out at the Warner Theater. It's going to be February 3rd through 5th, and then you'll be back February 17th through 19th. And then, after that, if you still want to see them one more time, believe it's going to be in Wolf Trap in July. So
at Wolf Trap, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm speaking of Virginia right here again. So, man, I mean, you have tons of fans in this area. Thank you so much for joining us again, everyone. Susan Tedeschi and Tedeschi Trucks coming to Warner Theater. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I previously spoke with her husband, Derek Trucks, when Tedeschi Trucks played Warner Theater back in February 2020, right before the pandemic.
Thanks so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, I want to take it all the way back to the beginning. Obviously, you're the nephew of Butch Trucks of Allman Brothers Band. One of the greatest bands of all time. How much did you actually listen to them growing up? I mean, obviously, it's your uncle founding the thing, but how much are you aware of that? Like, what age does it start to actually, percolate for you that you say, oh, wait a minute, I'm part of this legacy here?
I mean, that music was always around. It was always in the house. I mean, it's the first stuff I remember hearing, so it was never not there. And my dad was a huge fan of that music. He was, he was up at those Fillmore shows, and it meant a lot to him. So it always felt unique and special. I think, I came into it when I first started playing music. That was always in the background for sure.
Do you have a personal favorite Allman Brothers song?
Probably not a song. I mean, that Fillmore East record and Eat a Peach were the ones that I always loved hearing and still do. It goes back and forth. There's a handful of great ones. That studio version of Blue Sky is pretty hard to beat.
Were you named after Clapton, Derek and the Dominoes?
No, I think that's true. Certainly the spelling came from that. But yeah, that was the other record that was in heavy rotation in the house when I was born and growing up. So yeah, that factored in too.
Awesome. Now, describe the story for our listeners. Try to paint a visual picture for me of, where you are when you get your hands on that first guitar.
I mean, it was kind of not that interesting of a story. I was, my mom would, we on the way home from school, if she'd see a garage sale, we'd stop in from time to time, and I think I had $5 in my pocket, and there was a really crappy guitar laying there. It was the only thing interesting. I didn't really have a huge drive to play at that point. It was just it wasn't a good garage sale, and there was nothing for a 8-year-old other than a guitar with 4 strings on it. So that's how it started. I brought it home, and my mom told me that my dad played a little bit, and if I bugged him, he would show me how to string it up and make it work. And that's how it started. It really wasn't me wanting to play. It just kind of fell into my lap. And then, when you're that age, sometimes you take the things. Sometimes things are they feel easy or natural, and you just roll with it. It's that way with sports sometimes, and it was that way with guitar. And then my dad had a few friends that played in local bands. One of the guys played in a band with my uncle in the 80s, a band called Trucks. This guy's name was Jim Graves. Still lives in the area down here. Great guitar player, but he was the first guy that came over and taught me, what the strings were, what the notes were, and just how to play cowboy chords. And I started sitting in with him at local clubs, and that's kind of how it got rolling.
You mentioned that it sort of just kind of came naturally. You made the sports analogy for some people. Like I've always wondered that, you're one of the greatest guitarists of all time at this point, but I've always wondered that whether, if it's something you're born with or if you truly believe that it's something that you can hammer away at and get better, advice for other guitarists. Is there an element that you think that you're just naturally gifted, or how much can you make up for it with just busting your ass on the guitar?
It's different for different people. I mean, I wasn't somebody that practiced a ton. But once I started playing, it was always there, and I always played. So I logged the hours in different ways. But I know people that, just didn't seem to have it in the beginning, and they worked until they did. I think you can come at it in any way. I think really it's about staying with it in the drive. I don't, some people might get there a little quicker, but as long as you get there, I don't think it matters.
Right, exactly. So all right, so you're at this young age, you're practicing here just to keep moving chronologically. Some people are starting to call you a little bit of a child prodigy, but to your point, you're just loving the music. I think you get your first paid gig at 11. Is it true you started using the slide because your hands were a little small on the guitar? Is that how you got around it?
I mean, when the guitar player that brought over a slide for the first time showed it to me, that definitely was a part of it. I mean, I think I was 9 or 10 when I first started playing slide, and it made more sense. And then all those sounds I were hearing on the Allman Brothers records, all that Duane Allman slide stuff, it all of a sudden made sense to me. So that was it too. It was a combination, but it was definitely easier for me to play slide at that point than straight guitar. And the guitar I had, it was hard to fret that thing. It wasn't very nice. So.
What was it like? I mean, to be like a early teenager, I think like 13, to play across a guy like a legend like Buddy Guy.
Buddy was amazing. I mean, he still does this. He takes young musicians under his wing, and he shows you the ropes, and he's incredible. I mean, I learned a lot from being on stage with him. He would bring a band down to a whisper, and the way he would deal with it. The dynamics of the music was incredible, and and he taught you the history of it while you were doing it, while you were playing with him. So yeah, those are lessons that you're really fortunate to get, and there's really no other way to get it other than being on stage with people that have been there.
Yeah, and then the lessons continue because in your early 20s, you'd already played with like Bob Dylan or Joe Walsh. I mean, you're playing with the greatest musicians of all time in your sort of your early, adolescent formative years. But memories or anything you picked up from touring with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're on stage with somebody like that, I mean, a lot of these people, they wrote the book in, different styles. BB was that way, certainly getting on stage with the Allman Brothers and Dylan, all of them. I mean, those are moments while they're happening, you're fully soaking it in, and you realize that you better pay attention. There's lessons here, and some of those moments you realize these are stories I'm going to be telling my kids and their kids. So when you're on stage with BB, you realize that, wow, this is a thing that's happening. You better remember this. So. Yeah, I mean, you feel really fortunate when that stuff is going on, and there's certainly a lot to learn. You learn more in those moments than you do talking to people about it. That's for sure. I mean, people often ask, anybody ever give you advice? And I mean, there's definitely I've gotten some good advice along the way, but it's that real time on stage. It's something your senses are wide open when you're in those positions, and that's when you learn the stuff. When people tell you not to mess around with heroin and other things, and they show you their track marks, that's a pretty good lesson too. But the musical ones are the ones that stick. Well, I guess that one stuck too.
Yeah, on stage and off stage lessons, equally important, my friend.
That's right. Pay attention.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, and then those final few years. We're talking like right before you meet Susan Tedeschi, but you're doing the Derek Trucks band thing. I think in the early '90s you formed them, but then also you're still touring with Allman Brothers. Officially joined them, I think '99ish. How cool was it for you to have your own band going on with the Trucks, but at the same time you're honoring the family legacy with Allman Brothers, and how cool to join them. You grew up listening to them, so you're finally playing with them. But how important was it to have your own project going alongside with that?
Well, I mean, when I got the call to join the Allman Brothers, it was something I never thought would happen, and I was deep into the music with Jan Rico and Todd and Kofi and Mike, and it wasn't even an option to not continue it. I don't know if Mike was in the band at that point. I think it was pre, but it was just that's what we were doing, and I had to find a way to do both. And yeah, I mean, it was incredible to go back and forth and playing small clubs with our guys and just feeling like you had to make the show work so you could get gas money to get to the next gig, and then hop on tour with the Allman Brothers, which was just a different level of traveling. But the music felt similar. I mean, a good night's a good night, a bad night's a bad night. It doesn't matter how you're getting there and what you're traveling in. The feeling is pretty similar. So that was a good lesson. But yeah, I mean, it was never in my mind that I could stop doing what we were doing with our group. I felt like that was vitally important, and that was going to be my future and our future. And that the Allman Brothers, it was great to be able to be a part of it and honor their legacy, but that was always their baby and not mine.
For sure. All right, we finally reached to it now. That the life-changing moment. When did you meet Susan Tedeschi? What was that initial encounter?
Well, I'd met her once before at one of my band shows at Smith's Old Bar in Atlanta. I met her briefly, and then she was on tour opening for the Allman Brothers that first year I was in the band. So that's when we really connected. Out on the road for months at a time, and just seeing her do her thing, and you don't meet many people that have that going on, and not many women know who Howlin' Wolf is and Wayne Shorter, so that helps.
Nice. I know you were doing Soul Stew Revival at first. Why'd you make the switch to call it Tedeschi to get your guys to names and family legacies in there?
When we did Soul Stew, we were just kind of dipping our toes in to see how it would feel to be on the road and put a band together, and we still had our own groups at the time. And when we decided to really do it, I didn't want to keep both of our solo bands going as a backup plan. I knew it had to be all or nothing. So, we decided once we did it had to be a new thing, and we had to start from scratch. And, we didn't, in those early years, we didn't really carry over a lot of the music we did with Soul Stew into this band. We tried to start it fresh. So it was really more about just making a clean break and starting something without a safety net, really.
Well, you hit the friggin' ground running, man. I think your first album together, Revelator, won the Grammy for Best Blues Album. Were you surprised at all that, you got that much acclaim right away with that first album, or did it feel that good as you were putting it together?
I think we felt pretty good about it. You never expect those things, but I felt like we were hitting it, and I felt like the band was it was the right thing, and everybody's head was fully in it, and it was a special time. I mean, we were just getting our studio together. We were just working with Jim Scott for the first time. I mean, we were all learning and growing quite a bit, and the band was fully focused on the task, and there were great songs on that record. And a lot of those tunes we play almost every night still. So it's music that lasts. And yeah, I mean, sometimes when you're recording a track, you have that feeling that this one's going to be around a minute, and there was a lot of that on that record.
Awesome. Well, so I know that one will probably always hold a special place in your heart, your first one that Tedeschi Trucks released. But how do you think you evolved over the next three more albums? How would you even describe your own sort of, evolution over those albums? I mean,
the band has gotten better every year somehow. I mean, there's been an ebb and flow, and there's some tours that are better than others, and there's definitely been times where I felt like we had to search for it again, but somehow it just keeps rolling. I just think everybody is, the musicians in this band, you're just always trying to find the thing and trying to make it better. And I mean, there's been a lot of life has happened to us between then and now, and that stuff makes you play different and play better, as long as your head's in it. But yeah, somehow the band just keeps getting better. I mean, these last few tours we've done, last year was a difficult year, but the band stayed solid, and the band kind of circled the wagons and somehow got tighter and stronger as a group. And I think you're onto something, and it's a healthy thing when that keeps happening, because that's not always the case. I've certainly been a part of things where there were times where you knew it wasn't getting better musically, and you knew you were kind of taking steps backwards, and you don't know how to fix it. But with this group, we've really never had that problem. It always seems to be sometimes inching in the right direction, and sometimes it's flying ahead in the right direction. But it always seems to be a purpose for some reason.
I love it. Well, remember, one of the big things I think I remember from that festival was Clapton. I mean, do you think that exposed your music to, an even wider audience? Like, that thing was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that was great timing for this band. The Allman Brothers were originally supposed to do, I think, that second Crossroads that we did. And then Greg got sick, and I think a liver was available, and so we filled in last minute. I mean, maybe 12 hours before we were flying up. We were trying to find the band, and not all the musicians were available. JJ was off on tour in Canada somewhere and had a gig that night, so we ended up having some guys filling in for that one show. It was really thrown together early on in the band's life, and but it happened, and it came together, and the few songs we played were great, and it really did propel this thing forward. So, sometimes you just got to be ready when the balls hit to you. You never know.
Exactly. And how cool was it, man? We're a D.C. station, so I got to ask, how cool was the White House? I guess that was in 2012.
Yeah, I mean, it's wow. It seems like a lifetime ago. There was actual real music in that place for a while. It was pretty incredible. I was on stage with Buddy Guy and B.B. King, and there was the president and first lady and people in the room that actually understood what that meant and cared about it. And it was, they were honoring B.B. King in the East Room of the White House. And, there were a lot of powerful people in the room, but you knew who the man of the hour was. It was a guy from Mississippi. It was an incredible day. And, just the way that place felt, it was, maybe someday we'll get back to that. It'd be nice to have music in there again. I think it keeps you sane, man. I really think it helps.
Music is the medicine, man. Oh, you mentioned B.B. King. I think when you played with him out at the Hollywood Bowl, I think I read something where he paid you the ultimate compliment after you got off stage. He was like, that's the best. That's as good as I've ever heard the guitar played. I mean, is it strange for you when you see, when you hear someone say something like that, or when you start projecting yourself with the all-time greats, or Rolling Stone ranks you amongst all these that you've admired for so long? Like, it's rare air, man. Can you even see yourself in an all-time view like that? I mean, that's got to be a little humbling.
I mean, you don't think about it often. I mean, the Rolling Stone thing, you don't really know what to make of that. When BB pays you a compliment, that feels different. I mean, that feels like, it's your hero, and it feels like real validation. And if anything, it just makes you feel like, all right, we're on the right track. That you can do what you're doing confidently and not overthink it all the time. So, but yeah, those things actually give you a little bit of juice going forward. And you think about those, or you feel it differently. You also look over your shoulder to see if he's talking to somebody else. it doesn't fully register.
Did he mean me?
Yeah, but I mean, he's just one of the sweetest humans of all time, and he's like Buddy Guy and like some of the people we've been lucky to play with. They want that music carried on, and they want people that believe it and feel it and mean it to keep doing it. So that's when they say those things or do those things, they have a purpose. I mean, BB was always that way with Susan too. He would always have her on stage, and when she would sing, he would just light up. And those are, that it gives you confidence to keep doing what you're doing, and you don't really care what other people think if BB likes it or if Little Milton likes it or John Lee Hooker. You're like, those are my people.
that's the only ranking I care about.
Totally, so.
All right, cool. Well, you've been more than generous with your time. Thanks so much. Just sort of closing final question, what can we expect to hear?
The beauty of this group is that everyone's always trying to dig deep into the catalog and find tunes we haven't played in a while, or even songs of ours that we haven't broken out yet, or so it's always different. I mean, we keep track of the set list that we played last year and the last time we're in a room, and you really try to make sure you don't repeat yourself too much. You never want to sacrifice the show getting there, so you don't just go obscure just to do it. But there's enough good music in everyone's catalogs at this point where we can dig pretty deep and change it up, and it keeps it fresh for everybody on stage. It keeps us on our toes, and we've been breaking out a little acoustic set of every once in a while, every few nights, especially when we're in a venue for more than one night. That's been a lot of fun. Something nice about hearing the voices when everything else is stripped down around it, and but yeah, just different sides of the band. But there's a lot to dig into.
Awesome, everybody! Tedeschi Trucks Band. Hey, thanks so much. You were great.
Thank you, man. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the D.C. area is great, and Podcast D.C. gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast D.C. is the new local app with hundreds of D.C. area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast D.C.